The shrill cry tore through the dry morning air of Ndongo Village, echoing across the cracked clay paths where the red dust clung stubbornly to every footstep. Amara, barely 23 but already carrying the weight of years, fell to her knees as her father's fist smashed against the wall near her face. Her mother's absence had left a hollow in her home that neither time nor prayers could fill, and her father, Bale, once a gentle farmer, had drowned his grief in fermented palm wine until kindness evaporated from his eyes. Beside him stood Mamikena, his new wife, her face twisted in cruelty, arms crossed as though Amara were a disease she had to endure. The villagers peered cautiously from behind their fences, whispers caught in their throats, paralyzed by fear of Bale's wrath. Amara's broom had splintered under her grip, yet she did not move, her heart hammering, realizing that this morning could mark the beginning of an unknown fate, and for the first time she felt powerless to stop it. The home in Ndongo Village was not a sanctuary but a cage painted in shadows. After her mother's death 5 years ago, Amara had known only hardship. Long days harvesting millet in the scorching sun, nights spent scraping rice from pots, and endless commands that left her body bruised and her spirit frayed. Bale had once laughed at her small jokes, praised her careful hands, but the wine had corroded his heart, and Mamikena despised her with a meticulous cruelty. Each day began with exhaustion and ended in despair. Neighbors whispered pity behind reed walls, but fear silenced them. Amara had learned to move like the wind, quiet, unnoticed, resilient. She had survived hunger, scorn, and violence, but deep inside, beneath the fatigue and humiliation, a stubborn spark of hope refused to die. Though her world had become narrow and cruel, the thought of a life beyond Ndongo Village sometimes whispered to her, fragile as a passing breeze. One dry afternoon, a young man named Jelani arrived in Ndongo Village. His shirt was faded, his sandals worn, and dust clung to his skin like a second coat, but there was a sharpness in his gaze, a clarity that saw more than he let on. He had come from the city seeking work, carrying nothing but ambition and hope, yet the village regarded him with caution. Bale hired him cheaply, promising pay that never materialized, and Jelani endured the sun's cruelty, the endless labor, and Bale's empty promises with quiet determination. From the first day, Amara noticed him, not because she expected rescue, but because she recognized in him a kindred resilience. He worked alongside her in silence, occasionally glancing her way with eyes that seemed to understand the weight she carried. And though words were few, something in his presence whispered that the world beyond Ndongo might not be entirely cruel. The breaking point came one blistering afternoon when Jelani approached Bale, demanding wages he had earned for months. The man's beard bristled as he surveyed the field. Then, with a wicked grin, his gaze fell on Amara, sweeping the courtyard under the relentless sun. "Take her instead," Bale said with casual cruelty, as if bartering her like a sack of grain. Amara froze, the broom slipping from her hands, and Mamikena's laughter echoed like metal on stone. She fell to her knees, begging, voice trembling, tears carving paths through the dust on her face. Jelani's chest tightened as he watched her, shock and sorrow twisting within him. He realized at that moment that Amara was more than broken. She was luminous, a spirit unwilling to yield entirely to suffering. In a whisper barely audible, he said, "I will take her." And with that, a door opened in their lives, one that led away from despair toward uncertainty and perhaps toward hope. There was no farewell meal, no prayers said, no hugs, only silence and the weight of abandonment. Amara packed her few belongings in a black sack, each item a remnant of a life she had once known. Her younger brother, Tano, hid behind the clay walls, crying silently as she walked away. The journey to the city stretched long and unkind, buses rattling over dusty roads, villages blurring into one another beneath the relentless sun. Amara stared out the window, unsure whether to fear or hope, feeling both exhilarated and abandoned at once. Jelani rode beside her, quiet, his thoughts heavy with worry and calculation. Her prayer was whispered under her breath, a plea to the ancestors and the sky alike. Protect me, guide me, give me strength. She clutched her sack like a shield, heart pounding with the weight of the unknown. Each mile felt both endless and small, as if destiny itself were urging her forward toward a life that might finally honor her spirit. When they arrived, the city rose like a living wall of concrete, noise, and color, overwhelming Amara's senses. Jelani guided her down narrow alleys until a black iron gate opened, revealing a compound that seemed to belong in a dream. Flowers lined the paths, a small fountain whispered quietly, and white walls gleamed under the sun. They passed the main house and arrived at a smaller building tucked behind, modest yet immaculate. Jelani explained this was his dwelling, given freely by the woman who owned the estate. Inside, Amara touched the bed with clean sheets, the doors that locked, the silence that spoke of safety. For the first time in years, she breathed without fear, and sleep came gently that night, unbroken by shouts or blows. The world felt different, still unknown, but promising. Somewhere deep inside, a fragile hope began to bloom, untainted by cruelty, unshadowed by betrayal. Jelani treated Amara as an equal, with respect and patience. He cooked meals, spoke gently, and never demanded more than her consent. One evening she gathered courage to share her fears, the scars of her past, the terror of men who used power to dominate. Jelani listened without interruption, acknowledging her pain while promising safety, trust, and respect. He told her he had seen her strength long before the cursed bargain, and his heart had silently marked her for her courage and dignity. Amara's chest loosened. She did not love him yet, but she began to see that not all men were like her father. Trust, she realized, was fragile and rare, but with Jelani it had a chance to grow. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a quiet optimism, a delicate belief that kindness could exist even where cruelty had once ruled. The owner of the house, Madame Halima, was a woman whose presence commanded peace. She noticed Amara's humility, diligence, and intelligence as she moved through the estate, tending the small kitchen and learning the rhythm of domestic life. When the estate cook left to travel abroad, Madame Halima offered Amara the position, recognizing her potential. Amara wept openly, gratitude spilling through tears she had long held back. She revealed her dream, to return to school, to learn beyond survival, to rise beyond her past. Madame Halima embraced her warmly, praising her courage. For the first time, Amara understood that life could offer opportunity as a reward for resilience, not merely for birthright or beauty. This was a step, small yet profound, toward independence, learning, and dignity. Then came Seifu, Madame Halima's son, whose charm carried a subtle threat. He entered the kitchen boldly, his eyes assessing, his words dripping with flattery and mischief. He felt instinctively that he was dangerous in his ease, like a snake coiled in sunlight. Over days he tested her boundaries, offering wealth, education, and influence in exchange for herself, trying to entice her away from Jelani. Amara resisted with calm and measured dignity, standing firm in her loyalty. Seifu's laughter turned sour when he realized that respect and love could not be bought. Amara's heart hardened against his advances. She would not trade integrity for luxury, nor abandon someone who had treated her with humanity and trust.
choice, though difficult, strengthened her resolve and marked the first true act of power she had taken for herself. Amara confided in Jelani, and he felt a flash of protective anger, but they chose calm over confrontation, praying together in the small room, asking for courage and guidance. The pressure from Sefu and Madame Halima mounted as they attempted to persuade her to consider the offer. Amara's heart burned with both frustration and clarity. She would not betray love for wealth, nor compromise her dignity for comfort. Together, she and Jelani devised a plan to leave the estate, to start anew on their own terms, even if it meant beginning in the smallest, most humble way. This resolve became a quiet victory, the first step toward a life they would choose themselves, rather than one dictated by power or coercion. The future was unknown, but it was theirs to claim. The following morning, Amara awoke to sunlight dancing through the small windows of their modest dwelling. Jelani had prepared breakfast, a simple meal of porridge and fresh fruit, but to her it felt like a banquet after years of hunger and neglect. They ate in companionable silence, each bite a quiet celebration of survival and of a future they would build together. Amara felt a warmth in her chest she had never known, the knowledge that someone genuinely cared for her, that her past suffering had not erased her worth. After breakfast, they discussed plans, not of wealth or luxury, but of study, small business, and learning skills to shape a life independent of anyone's whims. For the first time, Amara allowed herself to dream aloud. Her voice, once timid and uncertain, now carried authority, and Jelani listened, nodding, supporting, believing. It was in these moments she realized that love could be patient, protective, and empowering all at once. Days later, Sefu's subtle persistence tested Amara's resolve. He lingered in the kitchen with casual remarks, promising opportunity and education if she would leave Jelani. But each time, Amara's voice rang steady, firm, unwavering. "I am not for sale," she told him one afternoon, her eyes meeting his without flinch. "My loyalty is not bought with gold." Sefu's charm faltered, replaced by frustration and disbelief. Jelani, though calm on the surface, felt the tension rise within him, but he restrained anger, knowing that force or threat would only feed the conflict. Instead, he placed his hand over Amara's, a silent message of trust and protection. And though Amara's heart raced from fear and indignation, she knew she had made the right choice. She was no longer the timid girl from Ndongo Village. She was a woman who could face entitlement and greed with dignity, defending both herself and the man who had shown her the first glimmer of respect. Amara's integrity did not go unnoticed. Madame Halima watched quietly from the sidelines, her curiosity mingling with admiration. She had expected compliance, obedience, perhaps a polite flirtation with Sefu's offers. Yet, Amara's courage and clarity struck a chord in her heart. She realized that Jelani had chosen wisely, and that the girl's steadfastness was rare, something to be honored, not challenged. One afternoon, she summoned Amara to the main house, not to tempt her, but to praise her. "You are strong, wise, and honorable," she said softly, her voice carrying genuine warmth. "The world will not always respect that, but you will always have my respect. Jelani is fortunate to have found you." Amara's eyes filled with tears, grateful for acknowledgement, for validation, for the sense that she was seen not as labor, not as a commodity, but as a human being worthy of love, trust, and opportunity. It was a turning point, a quiet triumph over years of invisibility. The following day, Sefu approached Amara again, emboldened by youthful arrogance and wealth he assumed would sway her. "Think about your future," he said, attempting charm mixed with veiled threat. "I can give you anything: education, clothes, influence, everything Jelani cannot. One word from you and all this can be yours." Amara's spine straightened as she faced him fully. "No," she said, calm but firm. "I am not for sale. My loyalty is not bought with gold. I will not be coerced. My future is mine to shape with the man who has shown me respect and care. That is the life I choose, not the one you offer me in exchange for obedience or compromise." Sefu's smile faltered. He had underestimated the girl who had survived Ndongo Village's cruelty and the relentless sun, the girl whose spirit could not be bought. His offers, once intoxicating, fell flat against the armor of her resolve. Amara had claimed her power, and no bribe, threat, or promise of luxury could shake it. With the pressure behind them, Amara and Jelani turned to their own plans. They pooled his modest savings to rent a small space in the city where they could start a business, a simple eatery offering home-cooked meals. Amara experimented with recipes, noting them carefully, while Jelani managed logistics, finance, and security. Their work days were long, filled with sweat and uncertainty, yet each evening brought quiet satisfaction. They laughed together, shared dreams, and slowly built a rhythm of life governed not by fear or submission, but by shared purpose. Amara studied in her spare time, determined to complete her education, and claim knowledge denied to her for years. With each small victory, each meal sold, each customer satisfied, each lesson learned, their confidence grew. The city, once overwhelming, became a landscape of possibility where their hands could shape reality rather than merely survive it. One evening, Jelani revealed a secret he had long carried. His mother, Madame Halima, was not simply the owner of the estate, they were her heirs. He had hidden it to ensure Amara's love was sincere, not swayed by wealth or influence. Shock rooted Amara to the floor, emotions colliding, betrayal, relief, amazement, and laughter. "You tested me," she whispered, half angry, half amused. Jelani nodded solemnly. "I needed to know your heart, not your compliance, not your fear or gratitude for money, but your courage, your dignity, your love." Amara felt tears slip freely as she realized the magnitude of what they had endured together. Temptation resisted, power defied, loyalty proven. The revelation deepened their bond, affirming that love founded on trust and mutual respect could weather deception, wealth, and desire. From that day forward, their relationship deepened. Amara and Jelani shared laughter, dreams, and small victories, building not only a business, but a foundation of mutual respect and care. They learned the rhythm of shared responsibility, celebrated each success, and comforted each other in failures. Their home, though modest, overflowed with warmth, trust, and joy. The city outside hummed with chaos, but inside their walls, they discovered the sanctuary of love earned, not purchased. Amara's confidence flourished, her spirit strengthened by the knowledge that she could choose, resist, and shape her destiny. Jelani admired her with each passing day, not for beauty alone, but for courage, wisdom, and the rare ability to stand unshaken in the face of temptation. News of Amara's triumph reached Ndongo Village. Her father, Bale, humbled and fearful, attempted to reach out, seeking forgiveness and acknowledgement. Amara's response was measured. She forgave, but she set boundaries. She would not return to the household that had nurtured pain and cruelty. Her strength radiated like fire, demonstrating that redemption was possible only on her terms. Stories of her resilience spread quietly through neighboring villages, inspiring young women who had been told to accept suffering as fate. Amara became a living testament to endurance, wisdom, and the transformative power of respect and love. She had left behind the shackles of her childhood, creating a life defined not by suffering, but by choice, agency, and the courage to stand firmly for one's values. Years passed, and Amara completed her education, becoming a skilled healer, a scholar in the art of medicine. Jelani continued building their business, turning it into a thriving enterprise that offered opportunity to many who had little. Together, they cultivated a life of modest luxury, yes, but more importantly, a life full of love, respect, and mutual admiration. Their union was not a product of convenience or wealth, but of deliberate choice, of a shared history of struggle and triumph. The girl once sold as a commodity had become a queen in her own right, shaping her destiny with determination, intelligence, and a heart that refused to bend to coercion. On a peaceful afternoon, standing together before their home, now surrounded by flourishing gardens, Amara placed her hand on her belly, smiling at the life growing within her. Jelani lifted her off the ground in joyful triumph, laughing as tears streamed down his face. "This is ours," he whispered, his voice trembling with love and awe. "Everything we have built, everything we are, it belongs to us together." Amara looked around at the life they had forged, simple, yet full of dignity, freedom, and love, and whispered a prayer of thanks. From dust and hardship, they had built a sanctuary. From cruelty and despair, they had crafted trust, respect, and joy. Their story, carried forward in whispers among villagers and travelers, became legend, a tale of resilience, of love that honors integrity, and of hope that blossoms when courage, faith, and unwavering devotion prevail.